Welcome back, all my 40K fanatics out there. I'm DJ here with Tim's Nation. This week we have seen so much new Warhammer content for 10th edition and what we're going to be seeing, and it's been a lot to digest, and I want to take some time and just go over a couple of the things that we've seen this week in the three different news updates that Games Workshop had up on their website this week. Guys, if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please do. Turn on the bell for notification. Like, share, subscribe, all that's jazz. Let's get into it because I'm real excited to talk about some of these things. There's some stuff that scares me a little bit, but for the most part, I think that this is all going to be pretty good. Just a couple things that I'm hoping go a certain way. And we'll get over to those. So first things first, this at the beginning of the week, we got some updates with the phases. So the phases are, for the most part, not really changing. The only difference between the phase order is that the morale phase has been taken out. Everything else is still in the same order, probably roughly will operate the same, just changing up some dice rolls or volume of dice in some of these scenarios, but for the most part, that's going to stay the same, except for the morale or battle shock step that'll be added to the command phase. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Because first, I want to talk about the removal of the psychic phase. So we'd heard that this was happening. We heard that the psychic phase was coming out. They were going to go back to kind of an old school style where the psychic powers are being done during a different phase, movement phase or shooting phase, or even in the command phase. So hearing that and seeing this now, it looks like we're not going to be rolling any dice at all, that psychic powers are just going to be a thing that happens. Now, off of some characters, there's going to be some powers that are still potentially going to have a penalty. For example, the first one that they preview, the Librarian. Now, the Librarian has the hazardous weapon profile on his other version of Smite, which only gets +1 strength and +1 AP to gain hazardous and devastating wounds. Devastating wounds being 6s to wound, do a mortal wound in addition to any damage. And hazardous weapon, while we haven't seen a ruling on that yet, hazardous weapon is probably going to be the current plasma gun rule or plasma rule. I think that it's just going to read, if you roll a 1, you take a mortal wound. I don't think it's going to fully take out the model, since a lot of bigger things like tanks and stuff that have plasma, it's easy to just count them as hazardous and you take 1 mortal wound. The other thing that's kind of interesting on this Librarian's profile, off topic of the psychic powers, is there is a combat weapon on here. Now, this combat weapon has devastating wounds. So it's doing mortal wounds in addition on 6s to wound. Rapid fire 1. It looks like a bolter with ballistic skill 4. The question is, where's the other half of this combi? So one thing and what I find interesting about this is that means that all the data sheets that we're being shown right now are having more text pieces added to them as we go. So this means that there's Games Workshop is working on building a template, it looks like, for how we're going to see these different units and how these books are going to be built up. And from my outlook on this is, hopefully, I think that Games Workshop may be giving us good army construction for digital platforms like smartphones, tablets, computers, and being able to have this as a faster interface. We already see the inclusion of so many keywords. By being able to select these keywords on a digital interface, you can see what these abilities can do without having to flip back and forth through a book. So hopefully this is, and with them being able to just add, like obviously on this sheet, we're missing what a combat weapon is. Where's the plasma? Where's the flamer? Where's the melta? And that can be easily added to the data sheet very quickly. So what else is missing from some of these data sheets? Who knows? And we'll see over time. I think the Termagant just is very, very bare bone right now, and there might be a lot more on that data sheet or data card. Finishing up with the Librarian, Veil of Time looks really cool. I'm not going to lie. That's a unique ability, giving the sustained hit to your unit. There's many units that can put down a lot of firepower, and being able to generate additional attacks is kind of cool. The 4-up Feel No Pain against psychic attacks. I think we're going to see more psychic attacks in the form of guns than just like psychics, like witch fires and things like that. Grey Knights, Thousand Suns, for example, being able to have slightly better bolters that are just psychic attacks, and also because of the fact that it gives a 4-up Feel No Pain versus psychic attacks, that means you're not going to get that Feel No Pain against devastating wounds, because those are doing mortal wounds. So it's nice. It's interesting to see that Games Workshop is kind of dividing what a 4-up invulnerable, or what the invulnerable save is. The Feel No Pain, what you're getting the Feel No Pain against. You're not getting the Feel No Pain against everything. You're getting the Feel No Pain against a very specific group of attacks. And I wonder how often we're going to see that from different units, being able to give a Feel No Pain only during a specific phase or because of a specific weapon. So that's going to be cool to see how that unfolds. But moving on from the Marine, we got the Weird Boy. I don't know how I feel about the Ed Banger precision gun, so I'm not going to comment on that too much. Seems like a lot of an investment for not so much of a payout. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it'll be better off. But I definitely, the jump, I think the jump got hurt. I think that the fact that you can fail it on a 1, unless there is some way to re-roll it, unless there is some way, like again, may not be seeing the full data sheet here. There's little grots on that miniature. Can you purchase the grots, and when you roll a 1, you kill a grot and you pass it? That's kind of what I'm hoping for, because if it's a 1 and you fail it, that's going to be really hard to keep reliable and really hard to justify having him, because that turn that you need him to use to jump and move the guys and test for it, typically in the past you would just have command points or some other effect to make sure that you could get that cast to occur and do it reliably, and you could invest resources to make sure that you could get that spell off at least once or twice. And this, at any point in time, you can fail. And we've seen this with chaplains and their prayers. Any point in time, you roll the dice and they fail, and then you don't have them. So I really hope that for some type of ability, an iconic ability like that, we at least have some Gretchen on the base or something that he's able to sacrifice once over the course of the game to be able to make this go off. Lastly, in this news update, we had the Battle Shock rule. This is one of the ones that scares me. The Battle Shock is now 2d6. So at the beginning of your command phase, the way it's readed, it says you must take a Battle Shock test for any of your units that are below half strength. So my thought is you're going to do this for a unit every single turn until it is removed, once it's dropped to below 50%. This means a 5-man is dropped to 2, a 6-man dropped to 2, a 10-man dropped to 4, and a 20-man dropped down to 9. Now, the reason why I throw that out there and say those numbers is, remember, it has to be below half strength. One thing is they're doing leadership in reverse order now, golf scores, where a librarian is going down to like a leadership 6, because now you have to roll 2d6 and roll greater than or equal to the best leadership characteristic in the squad. As long as you do this, then you pass and nothing happens. However, if you fail, so you roll under the best leadership in the squad, these 3 things happen. One is, if you fall back, you must take a desperate escape test for every model in that unit. We don't know what a desperate escape test is, but for some reason that probably means that models getting cut down as they're trying to run away or taking damage. Its controlling player cannot use stratagems to affect that unit. Okay, that's pretty cool. We don't have, now that unit can't, pop off and have like one guy with a good heavy weapon annihilate an entire unit from the backfield while his entire squad just got beat up. Or you can't use a stratagem to rally a unit that did fall back in such way. The one that scares me is objective controlled characteristic of the model is 0. And why that bothers me is that it could put the situation, I don't like the fact that some random effect like that could technically possibly cost you the game. Because there's one thing that we don't know in this entry. Can a unit that is objective control characteristic of 0 still control an objective that has no other units on it? Because what is the state of controlling an objective? Is it first having a unit there, and then if your opponent has a unit as well, then you tally up the objective control characteristic? If that's the case, this is a great rule, and I think we'll see a lot of good use out of it. It'll be strong. It's not going to hurt things too bad. I don't think it's going to be. It's not going to be breaking. If the unit cannot control the objective, then that it's on by itself, then I think that's a risk factor, because late in the game, you really need a unit to just hold an objective. And I get what some people might say is like, okay, well then get a character back there, or do something to keep that from occurring, with leadership characteristics and protect that. We see a librarian's got a 6-up. He's a 6-up leadership. That still means if you go and roll the dice for that squad and you do everything you can, you roll double ones and that squad's not doing anything. And that squad is not holding that objective. And since this happens during the command phase, now you lose primary points for no reason. And that's what I'm concerned about, is losing primary points for no reason. Otherwise, I think it's fine. It's fine. And the reason why I'm saying it's great is because there could have been a really crazy opposite direction. And some people that know previous editions know, where there was a time where a 20-man squad, a 20 model count unit, could lose one guy, fail their leadership because they're forced to, because they lost one guy in combat. They fall back, but because they're foot troops, they fall back 2d6. And because you have a bike or jump pack or whatever you're equipped with, you fall back 3d6. And if you roll greater than they do on 2d6, you wipe out the entire squad. How many times in 3rd edition did one model crush a 10-man squad all by itself because of a failed leadership? That was a big part of the game, and a big issue with how leadership functioned at that time. And that's what I don't want to see happen, is where like a random dice roll like that could take away an objective and score and lose primary points late in the game. As long as the unit can still hold, then I think it'll work. It'll be fine. Moving over to the second article that we saw from GW this week, we got transports are the fast, flexible way to travel. They're showing us what we're going to see for transport rules, and this is all 6th edition. This is the upgraded, uncut version of 6th. And you know what? 6 was a great rule set for vehicles. Right now, the problem with transports are you almost lose a turn using a lot of them. And then the ones that can actually do something and move a unit across the field efficiently, and you can get out of maybe after it moves or any of these abilities, end up costing you more resources to do. So the first thing that they talk about is right off. This article basically has just completely revealed how vehicles are going to work, and it's great. First of all, it just says straight up, if you get out of a vehicle before it moves, you can move as normal, charge as normal, and it's all the same rules that we've used in 9th edition with getting out of a transport. If the vehicle moves, you can still get out, but now you cannot charge. I think that's great. It's cool. You can still use the fact that you have a boosted move from this transport. And third, if the vehicle advances, then you cannot get out of it. So that's the simple basis of how the rule is for transports and how they function. Then we move down to the if and then statements of everything with vehicles. The Taurox is one that shows us the rapid deployment ability. So a unit that has rapid deployment means that transport you can get out of when it advances. And okay, sure, cool. Some units that can do that. I'm expecting that things like raiders will probably be you'll probably be allowed to do that from Dark Eldar raiders. Orc trucks are probably another good one for it. And those are going to be ones you're going to be able to pop out of. But at that same time, some things like the Raider that's open topped and the trucks that are open topped, could you possibly be able to still charge after the thing moves? The Land Raider, you can. The Land Raider gets the assault ramp. So now, Land Raiders, if you get out of it after it moves, you can still charge because it has a ramp built for that. So, what else are we going to see with these, and where is this kind of going to get to with how these things are built? Well, it's basically I got to bring up the third piece of the puzzle: firing deck. Firing deck allows you to shoot X amount of models from that vehicle. Now, it specifically says models. So if you have two different units in there, each one could shoot one if each one had a good weapon that you wanted to shoot out of it. The weapons count exactly on the weapons count as extra weapons on the vehicle. So when you shoot the vehicle, these guns have to shoot as well. What's nice about this is because these are effectively guns that are attached to the vehicle at this point, units like the Orc Mechanic that can give +1 to hit to a vehicle within 3 inches. This means that a battle, as the example that they give, a battle wagon that has firing deck 22. So each one of the sluggas or whatever weapon you may have in there are going to get +1 to hit because they're effectively part of the vehicle when it shoots. The other interesting fact is this is firing deck 22, which means that thing can hold 22 models. Sounds like that thing went up in capacity there. Now, the reason I have to talk about this is because now when we look at all the other pieces to this puzzle with the rapid deployment, the assault ramp, and how many of these little extra rules are brought in here, it's going to make it that the vehicles can have a little more flavor, I feel. One that I'm greatly looking forward to seeing how this happens is the Ghost Ark. I think the Ghost Ark was kind of a flop this edition. A lot of Necron players agree with me that it should have been open top. You should have been able to shoot out of it. I don't know why it wasn't ever. It's always been. And it's been one of the cool features to be able to shoot the 10 warriors that it puts inside. The Ghost Ark already struggles that it can't take anything except Necron warriors. It has a capacity of 10, so you can't even put the characters to assist it inside of it as well. And now the guys came and shoot out of it, so it doesn't give it that boosted firepower when the 10 men are inside. So I'm excited to see how that works. But by not just associating, oh, this thing has open top, so it can shoot all of its guys out there. Instead, we have firing deck 22 on a battle wagon. So the Ghost Ark might be firing deck 10. And then we move down to rapid deployment. And then we might move down to open topped. So now when you build a Dark Eldar Raider and you look at its data sheet, that's where you're going to see open topped, rapid deployment, firing deck 10 or 12 or whatever it may be. And those rules, having just those 3 on there, will basically tell you that every guy inside can shoot out of it. You can get out of this vehicle when it advances, and you can get out of it when it moves and still charge because it's open top. So it gets this effective rule. Who knows? Maybe open top will be one keyword that'll say open top gives you rapid deployment, may assault after, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot to how this whole how this recipe is put together for what we're looking at for these different vehicle units, but it's going to allow units to get a little more of their flavor back without making other vehicles accidentally break everything and hurt. I don't think that Necron warriors getting out of a Ghost Ark after it moves and being able to charge is going to break the meta, but what other things might that should be able to open topped? Also a cool thing, think about with this firing deck, going back to orcs, how many what's the firing deck going to be on a Stampa? some of these things could have really, really cool battleship like qualities based on the guys that you have inside of them, making some of the bigger vehicles have more firepower by investing in their transports. It's going to be kind of cool to see how this all formulates, and it's going to give a lot of vehicles a lot more fluff in on the table. Last couple things that were covered in here is that the Chimera has mobile commands so that officers can issue orders inside. That's kind of a given. We've heard a lot of rumors about marine transports being able to pick up all different kinds of armored guys, and then Gravis counting as 2, Centurions counting as 3, so Centurions can get into a repulsor. Okay, I okay, sure. I don't see here nor there. This it gives other different, what do you call it, transports different viabilities and different usefulness. So doesn't bother me here nor there. I don't think there was a lot of reason to not have these guys be able to fit inside. It kind of seems silly. Just do it based on size and call it a day. The Falcon. The Falcon is interesting. The Falcon has the fire support. So this thing traditionally has been able to deep strike. So I'm looking at this thing and immediately going, man, take Magen Ra, 5 Dark Reapers, put them inside this thing, drop it in, have the guys get out after it's moved, because movement phase, deep strike, and then take it and shoot at like 2 separate targets, have Magen Ra shoot at, and then have the squad or Magen Ra get reroll failed wounds against one of the 2 targets that this thing hits with one of its 3 guns. This thing's pretty cool. This thing's cool to be able to put take over a corner of the map. You deep strike this thing in and take over a corner that's empty. You just put 5 long range models, a HQ that's both combat savvy and has a nasty range profile in every edition, and a tank down. That's a good way to start and hold that area while you get other dudes over there. So that basically sums up with the transports and stuff like that. It's going to be real. We kind of basically have all the rules for it now. I mean, realistically, going through it all, there's not much left except for what the data sheets look like, if there's going to be any reduction to their damage and stuff like that, and then the cost on some of the stuff. I'm real excited to see what some of the bigger ones look like different Baneblade variants and what they're able to take. The Stampa, like I said, that thing is just what's the fire deck on that thing? I want to know the fire deck on the Stampa. That is a number I'm very interested in. And one thing also, when we talk about toughness values and we see all these toughness values going up, what's the toughness value of the Warlord Titan going to be? I'm just curious on anyone's guesses on what they think it's going to be. I'm voting T100. This needs to be the time that if any model gets to break out of double digits, because we've seen double-digit toughness for a couple different Forge World models. If we're going into bigger and higher toughness values, I want to see Warlord Titan T100. Toughness 100 on that thing. All right. So moving on to the last article that came up today, today is the time of recording this video. Terrain. Now, I've seen a lot. This is still kind of something that I think people are digesting, and it's going to take a little bit of time to we have to see a little bit more before we can fully understand it. What I'm reading here is that a lot of people are saying oh, obscured isn't there. Oh, dense cover isn't there. Oh, there's no more dense in this stuff. I think that's a little knee jerk. I think we're jumping ahead. We're jumping the shark on this one. It says when it talks about the terrain and how terrain was in the current edition, there's one little footnote on the bottom that I find interesting. And that's that there were, technically speaking, over 12,000 possible terrain types. Now, what that means is that all of the different terrain benefits that we had, you could assign those terrain traits to any different piece of terrain. What Games Workshop has done is they've come out here and they've said, okay, here are the types and pieces of terrain. If you are using this, so this is not necessarily about cover. The cover is, we get to see what cover affects these different pieces of terrain. But I think the more important thing to take away from this is Games Workshop has basically said on your table, you will have craters or rubble, barricades and fuel pipes, battlefield debris, hills and sealed structures, so flat brick buildings or stuff, woods, and ruins. Now, with those terrain that we are seeing, with those different labels, each one of those is going to have their own sets of rules that are for these. Otherwise, so whatever you have and you put on the table, you basically have to say which one of these six, and there's six of them, categories that piece of terrain falls into. And then it gets these benefits. So this article is talking about the benefit of cover. So I think that, like, you see craters and rubbles is the first one that pops up on the screen. Each time a ranged attack is allocated to an infantry model that is wholly on top of a terrain feature that a model is in, it gets the benefit of cover. So what this is basically saying is, like, okay, if you have a footprint of anything, footprint of any piece of terrain, manhole covers, et cetera, that's what the crater is. The crater is the something on the battlefield. So it's saying that footprint for that piece of terrain is going to give the benefit of cover. When you move down to barricades and fuel pipes, it gives some rules for engagement. It shows about the fact of how you treat these with being in range of them. Units are eligible to fight models if they're opposite side of the terrain feature and within 2 inches of them. So basically this says is that you have to be within 2 inches of that model for these tiny, like, barricades and stuff like that. So you're able to charge from the other side and don't have to put your models directly on top of these things and watch them fall off. And the same goes true for the charge for how you have to be. So it just basically is going to tell you, in a sense, you have to get as close as you possibly can to that pipe, which shouldn't be more than 2 inches thickness. As far as the benefits of cover, it talks about the 3 inches from this terrain feature and not fully visible. Not fully visible is going to be a key part of a lot of the terrain cover and benefits that we have for this article, as they're really focusing on the model perspective over the unit. It says if that model is not fully visible. So we're going to be still in the era where the player who controls the unit being shot at can determine which models are actually going to get hit. And this goes a lot more with debris. Debris is actually covered a lot better already for cover. Basically, debris is any of your cool little accessories and stuff you put on the battlefield. You got these little tiny buildings or doors, or the pictures that they show is like a statue and some plasma generators. So if you get shot at, you can select a model that cannot fully be seen by your opponent's unit, and therefore then they pick up cover. Now, that's the only benefit that they're showing right now at this time. And I don't think there's going to be very many benefits for it, but I think there's room that there could be more terrain benefits that these battlefield debris pick up. And they're not going to go into crazy, like, oh, well, it could be that plasma or it could be this statue. It's just going to be some generic overall abilities that are in effect when you have these. And that's going to pertain to things such as woods. Woods just have a wide idea of how visibility works, and it just explains the same deal as we've done before. If you draw your line of sight through that piece and you're not a Titanic or towering or an aircraft, then you are getting cover because you're being shot at through the trees. If you're in the trees and you're shooting out of it, then the unit that you're shooting at does not receive the benefit of cover. That's all the same stuff as how we've been treating it right now. And lastly is runes. Runes have the benefit of cover, as we've seen before, is that if the model is not fully visible to every model in the attacking unit. So units that are behind a wall that would take the shot would get the benefit of cover. They also get the plunging fire rule. So guess what? A lot of buildings are suddenly going to be 6 inches tall. Now, when getting down from that, you're going to have to move 6 inches straight down. So it's going to take your entire turn to go from the top level to the bottom level. However, assuming that you have a 6 inch move. However, if you're on that top level where you most likely can be seen because you're going to want to shoot, you now increase the armor penetration of your attack by 1 for having the higher ground. I did drop one piece of terrain that I kind of skimmed over and didn't really talk too much about was hills and sealed structures. So these are just, as we've seen, they're true line of sight blocking things that are an exact size and what they are. Competitively, we'll probably see a lot of the same terrain we're seeing right now with runes. I'm assuming that runes are probably still going to have an obscuring effect that we've just yet to see with the terrain, and we'll probably see that get added to them as far as like wound caps and monstrous and towering and stuff like that. I think that's going to be a given. That was a very healthy rule, and I think we'll see that here soon. Woods will probably get a dense cover type effect to reduce accuracy through the woods. I would hope. I would think so. And then things like battlefield debris and the hills and seal structures probably won't see too many more rules. Maybe some rules on just how you have to move up and down them, and moving up and down them based on their measurement might also be the same rule that correlates with runes and how you would go up and down the level. I think we'll hear that a lot of I think that the obscuring will probably still be a building over 5 inches tall. Maybe it will go to, because then this would give you the reason for that floor. And I think we're going to have a lot of buildings that are going to be assumed as 6 inches tall for the sakes of tournaments and tournament organizers, so we don't have to worry about getting bigger buildings. But yeah, that's basically the wrap up and where I kind of feel things are. Let me know what you guys feel in your comments down below, and what you guys are thinking about these new terrain setups. Are you worried and thinking about replacing some of your pieces of terrain? Are you just considering, okay, well, this building that's been for me, oh, well, this building's been 4 inches tall that I practice on all this edition, and I've said it's 5 inches tall. Well, I'm going to say it's 6 inches tall now, and it's going to be first floor, second floor, and your entire movement is going up. And I think that's going to be the easiest way to do it with a lot of these different buildings, is just declare that these corner ruins and stuff that have a second floor, that second floor is 6 inches off the ground. And it's just so terrain will still make sense. Guys, thank you for listening. I look forward to reading some of your comments down below, and I'll talk to you again soon.